Sorry, we have to turn them on. My apologies. Let me start again here. That'll help with my bad voice too. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the City of Lake Forest Parks City Council special meeting for Thursday, January 18th to order. And with that, I've asked Councilmember Goldman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance because my voice is failing me. Mr. Goldman.
Yep. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Council Member. Do I hear a motion for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, Council. Items for discussion and consideration and/or action this evening. We have options for receiving public comments at public meetings. I'd like to start by asking Attorney Pratt to give us a quick brief on some of the basic parameters of special meetings, if you could, Kim.
Yeah,
Cliff's notes would be awesome.
sure. So the statute provides that council can have special meetings, 24 hours notice has to be given, which city clerk is in charge of. And the statute says that anything you list on the agenda, you can take final action on. You could add items to agenda, but you could not take final action on those items. Some councils choose not to even add items to the agenda because it's a special meeting. That is always up to you whether or not you want to do that because it is a special meeting. But you can't, you can only take final action on items on the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt. I appreciate that. And I would encourage my colleagues, if you haven't done so before, the MRSC has fantastic primers and deeper dives on special meetings, et cetera, and the authority vested in the council as well as the chair of the meeting to call a special meeting. So it's really a useful tool. And with that, I would like to introduce this item. Mr. McLean is going to give us a brief introduction here, but I did want to say, once again, I don't do this lightly, and I want to thank you all for being willing to be flexible to come here tonight to have this important conversation. And I am hoping that we will ensure that we stay within our guardrails and stay on topic specifically about public comment. With that, Matt, you have the floor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Here to discuss options about public comment. As you were all painfully aware at the last meeting, we continued to have rude disruptors during public comment. We were quick to shut them down pretty quickly. So tonight I presented in our packet 3 options. One would be just to limit public comment to in-person only. Another would be to require people to sign up to comment online prior to the meeting. And the third would be kind of requiring people to sign up, but then doing an extra step or I have to verify the speakers. If we limit it to in-person only, we would still have to make accommodations for people that request accommodations. We would probably put a notice on our website to contact me directly if they need to make accommodations to speak online. Other than that, willing to take any questions. If you want to know what our neighbors are doing, I can clue you in on that too.
We actually have some new information too, since our conversation on Friday, I believe, relative to the efficacy of some of these methods, if I'm not correct.
I'm not sure where you're going.
Meaning that even with some of these different options, people are finding ways to get around it.
Oh, yes. So for an example, Shoreline has a sign up process where people sign up online to comment, but the same people are the same bad actors are still signing up online and they're still being called on to comment at public comment. So that's not really working for them. Kenmore is doing the same thing, but they're verifying the speakers before they allow them to speak. So they actually have the extra step of actually calling the person prior to the meeting to verify that they're a speaker. I really don't recommend that because then, for example, like the sound transit people, that would be, I think there was about 11 people online that commented online, so verifying everybody online would take a lot of time. Making sure that they reach back and call. Yeah,
Councilmember Furchani.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And
Yeah, we have to go. Oops, sorry.
Yep.
No.
okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, City Clerk McLean, because I'd been wondering about that. Kenmore's solution, the verify the speakers, did they have that in place when they had their infamous meeting a few Mondays ago? Where they had, I think, 22 online speakers, something like that.
yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
So,
I think so.
so what would you estimate if we adopted that, how long it would take you or your staff to actually go through that number of people?
22 people, depending on whether or not they answer the phone or not, maybe an hour, hour and a half.
What about if there is a registration for online speakers, you'll have, and because I'm sure that people that are normally going to speak, like the regular people that are citizens, they can register and if you see their name, then you don't have to verify them. But the people that are not on that list and you have to verify, that might save if we want to do that. If we want to go to a verified type of system.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Goldman.
Thanks. I have two clarification questions. The first, when you say verify, what exactly does verification entail?
That would mean reaching out to the commenter to verify if they're a real person and not if somebody was on the other line, to make sure that they're not like a AI robot or something.
I see. But if someone was using an alias and they answered the phone as their alias, that would pass.
Yeah.
And then my second clarification, for the accommodation, if we don't have any remote comments at all and we have accommodations, what threshold does someone have to meet to be granted permission to comment remotely?
Just a request to me. I don't think I'd have to make any other kind of special accommodations for them. If
Okay,
that's
so-
what you're asking.
So they don't have to prove that there's all they have to do is say, I can't make it to City Hall.
Yeah.
Can I please comment online?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. I had a very similar question about what accommodations entailed and whether it was more on the disability side or just anybody. So thank you for clarifying that and asking that question. I did have another thought, and kind of for me, it's like, what is public comment? It's time for community to make sure that their voice is heard to council. And that's the limit of forum we have here, is we're supposed to hear from them. I'm wondering if having the option for, if folks write in, to basically have their letter acknowledged during public comment, that we have received, these letters on these topics. And then that way they know that it has been shared with us and that they know we're reading them. Because I think I've heard from some community members, is like, we even when they give public comment here, like, well, then what happens afterwards? But at least they know that we were here listening to them. So if someone can't come in and can't do a virtual comment, if they give you an email, would you be willing to read in, this person has this topic and this letter has been included in the record? And I think one other city does that, and they actually like link to the letters. I don't know if we need to go that far. I think just the topic would be sufficient. But Ms. McLean, what do you think about that?
I'm fine with that. That's fine. I think we had a policy before where when we had said that we were going to send it out to council regardless. So if somebody sent it in, then we would we say that it was sent to council. If we want to read it into the record, I'm fine with that.
I think that might be a nice way of acknowledging their effort.
If I might interject just for just one moment, Mr. Furtani, after we had our conversation earlier this week, I mentioned that to Matt, and it's interesting, Councilmember Riddle, we have not done that very much over a period of time as new technologies have kind of come into place. And I just want to interject here. I had a conversation with a couple of community members, and one who is very strongly for access for public comment, et cetera. And his comment was, I miss the days of people coming down to City Hall and actually participating if they can. And he said, I would welcome some changes as long as we're doing reasonable accommodations. And I said, that's required under state statute. And I can remember the days, shows how old I am, when we would put the speakerphone next to the microphone for somebody who would call in. And so that wasn't that long ago, honestly, before Zoom. So I think that there are opportunities for that and for the reasonable accommodation, and we always want to have public comment. Mr. Furtani, you've been very patient. Thank you, council member.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to voice support for Councilmember Riddle's idea of putting the letters that we receive, because often I don't think we necessarily get all the letters mailed to the city. I know that sometimes members of the public address it to specific council members or to just city staff, and it would be great to hear from all the different letters. So I think that'd be appreciated.
Thank you, council member. And just to be clear, and I didn't preface this, but in the packet, item number 1 is the one that I believe that we should be considering this evening. We don't have a formal policy. It's been sort of by consensus, if you will. And I think there's an option for us to potentially make some really positive changes here. And as our friend in the community said, maybe bring some people, encourage some people, come back and join us in the chambers if they're able to do so. And I certainly do believe that whatever we choose, or whatever you folks choose, as a community, there's an opportunity for us to revisit this again in the very near future. And I can think of a lot, and without enumerating them now to waste your time, I can think of a lot of circumstances in which we'd reconsider and think about moving forward with some changes. Because the technology is wonderful. We just don't want to give, we don't want to make some mistakes. Deputy Mayor Bodie, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. I have been thinking the very same thing, that whatever we adopt tonight or in the near future in terms of additional guidelines for public comment, I also think that it's kind of a test, and it's not locked in forever. I am a little bit reluctant to require everyone to attend in person unless they contact us and request a reasonable accommodation. I think people have gotten very used to commenting virtually through Zoom, and I know that there's been disadvantage from that, but I'm just and I know Shoreline apparently has had bad experience with that first option. So that's really unfortunate. That does bother me. But I guess I lean towards more of the baby steps and trying that first option to try to allow the most robust public comment that we can, and then revisit it in a bit if we need to. But I'm just cautious on all of this. That's all. Thanks.
Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you, Mayor. I abhor and am disgusted by the vitriolic hate speech that people want to foist on others. However, we live in a country where free speech is a sacred right. And I am reluctant to introduce measures that would reduce the opportunity for people to address the council. And so I think one of the things that we sometimes need to accommodate is because of the need for free speech, that there will be times when people will say things that we don't agree with. And that we have put in place ways to address that by limiting the public comment to items that are germane to the city council or the actions that we were taking at the meeting. And so I'm reluctant to put additional constraints on the opportunity for the public to address the council by requiring them to be in person or verifying that the person is who they say they are. I think as we've seen, folks who want to spread this hate will always find a way. And they may view it as a challenge to find a way to get around the systems. And I think if we even allow the audience or make it more difficult, that we in some ways are encouraging it, and that we are best served by the policy that we have in place now, that if the comment is not germane or it's hateful, that their comment is cut off. So I would be reluctant to put additional constraints for in-person or verification or sign up ahead of time, because I think it will burden us in ways that may not achieve the result we want. So I would encourage us to move forward with the policy that we have.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, Councilmember Golden.
Yes, thanks. And I suppose I'm struggling with this. And it is a hard question of how do we balance the need to protect ourselves and the community from hateful speech? How do we make things as easy as possible to hear from the public? And I suppose where I'm at, I'm in a similar place to Councilmember Lebo, that, I can envision that some of our larger public meetings that someone may come to the meeting not having expected to talk, or they might be on Zoom not having expected to comment, but they were inspired to comment based on something they heard somebody else say. But at that point, it's already too late for them to reach out to city staff to get permission. I think we handled last week much better than the previous incident last fall. I'm really struggling with this. I suppose I'm leaning more towards keeping our status quo, and that I think for me, it's really important to make sure that if people aren't able to attend the meeting, they still have a full opportunity, even if they didn't realize the policy. And because I think there have been other meetings where, not involving Lake Forest Park, but meetings in other cities or regional bodies that had this policy in place. And because of it, people were effectively shut out of being able to comment because they didn't realize the policy was there until it was too late. So based on that, I'm leaning more towards keeping the status quo, but I can understand why option one would help to address the problem of the hate speech, at least until people start to find workarounds.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I could offer, and I haven't verified this with the city attorney yet, but I'm going to throw out a curveball. Another possible option would be to keep the policy the same when it comes to public comments. We can pretty much recognize the bad actors online generally as it is. So when they come to that part of the meeting, I could announce that these people are suspicious and we probably shouldn't take public comment or something along those lines. And that's probably a red herring, but
Thank you.
That would be difficult, I think, to
Yeah.
do, because you're just basing it on the names. But at the last meeting, after a couple of those names, and it was apparent, it was very apparent at that point, those were the only people on the list who were making public comment. We cut off public comment. It was only being disruptive. And so that was okay. So I think you maybe gave some, just let it go a little bit, then this list of 6 people is a rotating list of 2 or 3 people or whatever, and you could cut it off.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think one thing that might be useful is if we do continue with Zoom public comments is to, when we open public comment, kind of, that's the list and we kind of close adding people so we don't get folks coming back in. And I don't know, again, with the legality of kind of closing off access to public comment, but we've given them the opportunity. They've had the beginning half of the meeting or portion of the meeting to get logged in. And then we close public comment after the last name at the time that we started public comment. So that might be one way we can handle those, at least those guys that are coming in back and under different names. I just can't wait till I have like a 5-second delay before broadcasting so that we can filter that way by, yes,
National broadcast.
exactly. Going back to old school
Right.
live broadcasting delays so that you can manage what's being produced. But until that's there, I'm balanced between keeping it the status quo and then maybe just not taking any new names after we open public comment, and making ourselves just less desirable at this time for those folks, and then open things up as we move past, hopefully, this period of time. Kind of debating which one is the best way to go.
Thank you, Councilmember Furtani.
Thank you. And yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Riddle's suggestion. I'm thinking that it might not address Councilmember Goldman's thought that somebody might be inspired to speak by one of the other speakers, right? And I kind of posed a question in my mind, which is, how do we prevent somebody from speaking twice? They're not really allowed to do that, right?
No, they're not, but some of those actors have rejoined under a different name.
Right.
And I don't have any immediate way to verify that.
Fair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Just a couple of thoughts. One, just as a reminder, Zoom public comment was instituted after a period of time during the pandemic, once we were able to set it up so that the public could have access during a very difficult time of emergent time. And so if this is something we'd offered for prior to the pandemic, I would feel quite differently about changing the procedure. I feel as though that there are challenges here. I mean, even if you have a situation where some councils require that people sign up by 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's an onerous process for limited staff here in our small city to try to verify all those people and sort it out. I certainly don't want to ever have a situation where someone's free speech is stifled. I will protect their right to free speech as long as it's not inciting violence or inciting hatred. And there's a lot of other things that I think nuances that we need to consider there. But the actual platform to allow the dissemination of such, I have concerns that we're contributing to this, and it's not a question of whether or not someone is, let me leave it there. I think that we need to make sure that we're not, if the community is saying, if we chose to do option 1, for example, and the community came to us and said, we don't like this, we don't have access, or even regionally, people said that, I would have a very serious heart-to-heart conversation with all of you. We would have that conversation and try to decide what is the best approach to find some middle ground. I just have concerns. I think about some of the things that occurred in November, not going into specifics, and the impacts that they have on individual lives. And I do believe that the anonymity of being able to speak vitriol is unacceptable. And so it's one thing for someone to stand up. I'm a United States citizen, or I am from another country and I'm visiting here, but I have the right to free speech. I will protect that tooth and nail. But I do not feel the same way about somebody doing it and hiding behind a veil. So I think that that's part of where my thinking comes from, and I totally respect all of your opinions on this, and it's the decision of the body, what you would like to do, whether we remain the same, we make some subtle changes, or we make whole scale kinds of considerations. We're not unique in this. So it's happening in other places. And I think the times are such where it's unfortunate that we have to even have this conversation, because we should be able to have a civil conversation and talk about positive things and solving problems for people, rather than trying to solve a problem that someone else has created through hatred. Councilmember Brutal.
I think one piece that might be useful to add into our policy, the bit that we read ahead, is a reminder that this is a limited public forum, that there are guardrails that can be in place so that there's an expectation that we will maintain the decorum of this institution. I don't know if that would help too much, but it makes it feel like when we do have to shut off a public comment, that we have a very sort of clear reason why we're doing it. It's not a free for all. So I don't know if that would help us feel more comfortable if we go back to open public comments on the Zoom, to feel more empowered that this is the right thing to do, and that they should be aware that it's not an offense to them that they can be mad at us about, because it's a limited public forum. We maintain the decorum of this institution's thoughts.
Councilmember, we did begin the last meeting with that script that Mr. McLean had crafted for us. And so that I think is very important. I think it's essential, actually. Deputy Mayor Bodie.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that we all share the concern about the disruptive or hateful speech, and we all share the concern about making sure that we allow free speech and robust public comment, especially from our citizens. So I do hear that from all of us. And I was just trying to process it and see where that leaves us. To me, it either leaves us with the status quo and then revisit it in say 6 months if that doesn't work well for us, or option one, and revisit that in 6 months if it doesn't work for us. Those are the two sides of the coin. One is more restrictive than the other. One is what we used at the last meeting when we continued to have disruption, but we were successful in cutting people off. I, like Councilmember Goldman, I am somewhat ambivalent about which one of those works. I could, but I think whichever one we were to choose, we should revisit it in 6 months and see, how is this working? Is it good enough? Has it affected our legitimate, relevant public comment, and so forth? So I wonder what the rest of my colleagues think, but it seems to me that that's what I've been hearing. But the important thing to me is, whatever it is that we think we should ride forward with, that we have an opportunity to see if it's working in the next few months.
There we go. Councilmember, yes, Councilmember Good.
I do agree with Councilmember Goldman and Lebo about leaving things the way that they are, because if you change something, it'll give them more fuel to try to overcome it. And if last council meeting was any representation, Matt was able to dump them pretty quickly without too much effort. And if if they're instructed that if there's any unacceptable comment, that they will be dumped, at some point they're going to hopefully give up. But I think giving them a challenge may encourage more bad behavior. But we were able to move on very quickly from last week. So if that's a representation, it didn't really do much to us as far as affecting us. So that's what I think.
Colleagues, thoughts? Or please, Councilmember Riddle.
I agree. If we go with more restrictive, we do need to revisit it. Absolutely. I'm almost kind of concerned about giving a deadline because then if they're really crafty, they'll just wait to that deadline and come back. So we will reevaluate this on a regular basis, maybe a more appropriate way of dealing with it. And because they'll just put it on their calendar, go back to LFP in, 6 months. So I don't know. I mean, I think if we just make it indeterminate, then they may just lose interest more than if we give it a deadline. I do agree that we don't want to make public comment any harder for anybody to make. But this is this weird, countrywide issue. It's not just us. And I think it's just going to take a while for this to pass. So I think maybe getting more restrictive and reevaluate it on a regular basis might be the best way to go for right now. And that may be a month. Who knows?
I think Mr. Lebo's next and then Mr. Furtani.
Thank you. We just recently put in place the procedure for how to better manage hate speech that may occur through public comment period. So I think I'm in favor of continuing as is. Part of what I think sometimes is best is to proceed as though they have not caused us to otherwise proceed as we normally would. These individuals are looking to create an environment of chaos, hate, and looking for an audience. So to the degree that we can just be matter of fact about it, I think they may lose interest. So we've put in place a change of procedure, and I think we should give it time to see how it can be, how well it can work, and recognize that this is something that occurs and we should be matter of fact about it. If you don't give somebody positive reinforcement, they will go away. And when I say positive reinforcement, it's a reaction. I don't mean to say that we are affirming the hateful speech.
Of course. Thank you. Mr. Furtani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I agree that the word regular, as Councilmember Riddle pointed out, is probably better than saying 6 months. After all, in 6 months, we'll have 12 council meetings, and we may actually want to revisit it sooner than that. The other point is that I think, I've been sort of waffling here too. I would love a world in which verification occurs, but I believe, Attorney Pratt, if I'm not mistaken, that even anonymous speech is protected by the First Amendment. Sure.
Yes.
So in that case, basically, I think having to whether maybe the first sentence of somebody's diatribe is worth basically having more open access to our ears. And I think the fact that we handled it in the way that we did the last meeting seemed effective. Certainly, in the November meeting that this occurred, there were members of the public who were in attendance who were deeply affected by it because we let them go on because we really didn't know what to do. But I didn't get that same reaction last meeting. So I think let's give our current policy a try and see how long it takes to outlast these others.
Well, thank you for summarizing, Council Member. So I'm hearing in the issue of being expeditious here and consideration of staff time, I'm hearing that you'd like to stay with the status quo, do what we can to make sure that we're very clear about our rules, as Councilmember Riddle had indicated, and see how things go at some sort of interval. To not be announced. We'll revisit it based upon success or failure, whatever those metrics look like. I think we all know what the success or failure metrics are. I hope we do. I know we do. And I do deeply appreciate the consideration and compassion and open-mindedness you guys bring to the mix here, because it's a really during challenging times like this, it's very easy to start looking at your feet and thinking about the bad things, the negative things. And I do believe these conversations, such as difficult as they are, can be very positive, and you've illustrated that tonight. So if there's nothing else that you would like to comment on topic about, I'd like to make sure that Deputy Mayor Bodie, Mr. Lebo, I'm looking over my shoulder here, so I'm making sure I'm not missing you. Is there anything else you would like to contribute, either of you two?
No,
Councilmember,
I'm fine, Mr. Mayor, with that outcome. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I do want to say, I think I agree with Councilmember Riddle's comment that we don't want to set a deadline that people can read out. So,
right?
but in any event, that won't be relevant, I think, and we can reconsider if this isn't working, but hopefully, hopefully there will be a attrition over time from the bad actors and that they will move on.
Mr. Lebo, and then I'll come to you, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the conversation this evening, and it does represent the sort of deep, thoughtful thinking of our council members to be able to always hear from the public. And I do think that we should, if our current procedure is not working, readdress it in the future.
Thank you, John. Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. Unless my colleagues are opposed, I think giving Matt the ability to kind of not take new names as they pop up might be a useful tool to provide him right now. As well as, I think it'd be really great if we, regardless of which way we go for digital public comment, if we do get public comment letters, I'd like that to be kind of acknowledged and read into the records, unless there's concerns from my colleagues. But I think those two would be useful for Matt and the community.
Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. That actually reminded me, I Ms. Pratt.
I just had a question. When you say acknowledge them, do you mean like we received a comment from so-and-so dated blah about Burt Gilman Trail, not actually reading?
Yes, I
We
think
did that for a while at the beginning of
It
comment.
was a while.
it would,
Oh,
yeah, it was
it's been
really
a
hard
while.
at the beginning.
Okay.
I
thank
first
you.
thought reading it in, I'm like, wow, that's not gonna, but I think, yeah, acknowledging who, when, and what the topic is would be sufficient.
Thank you. And Councilmember Riddle, you reminded me of something. In terms of the time frame, would you all be amenable, since we do public comment as closely as possible to the beginning of the meeting, would you all be amenable to cutting off sign up for public comment at the start of the meeting? And the reason for that is because of the rotating through. I would say that the last meeting, I believe we had public comment pretty quickly. It was within 20 minutes at the very least. And many cities who are allowing full open kinds of things are cutting it off a lot earlier than that. Is that something you would all consider? Mr. Goldman,
So I grew up on the East Coast, which I think has more of a culture of punctuality, let's say. And so I think cutting it off at 7, people tend to trickle in. I would say cut it off when public comment starts. So at the point where we start taking.
Riddle.
Exactly what my colleague said.
Okay. Mr. Lebo or Deputy Mayor Bodie. Is that acceptable to you both as well? We cut off additional signups after the initial start of public comment.
It would be acceptable to me.
Deputy Mayor Bodie?
It's acceptable to me, though I have just a slight reservation because I do think sometimes people listen to other comments and then they want to, especially if they're in the room, they want to stand up and speak. So if all the rest of my colleagues would be for that, I would agree to that, but I just have a bit of a reservation about it because I've seen that happen. Even perhaps most recently with the request for a lower speed limit that some members of the community came in and brought before us. I think the folks who were in the room at least spoke up who had not planned to originally. So yes, if that's the will of the majority, yes, but I have a few reservations about that just in terms of our actual community members being inspired by someone else's comment and speaking up.
Just on point, just for clarification, are you talking about virtually or in person? Because in person, we always have the option at the end of the comment period to say, is there anyone additional in the council chambers who would like to make public comment?
A good point, and so I
That won't
think,
change.
yes, if that doesn't change, then I think even with some caution, I'd be okay with that approach if everyone online who wanted to speak had to be indicate that at the start of public comment, that would work well. That would at least completely prevent the rotation of the same people.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Freeland. Yes. Oh, I love it when I'm right, or answer questions. I'm not sure. Councilmember Son.
Yes. I'm not sure how this would play out, but I know there's a chat option on Zoom. So if somebody did want to add comment to another person's comment, then, or is that just opening us up for even more possible hate language?
Yeah, there is no chat option on the webinars. And another point for cutting off signups. There's a little logistical problem there. Because the way it works right now, the people have to raise hands. And would we have a set time before we cut it off, or do we keep the
I think that's a good point. I think if the process was we take public comment from who's signed up on the list in the room, we allow others in the room to step up, and then you just take note of the names that are there and you ask for public comment from there. And not everyone will public comment. We know some people just listen in, but at least at that point, you know, this list of 6 names was there at the start of virtual public comment. And then whoever from there raises their hand, and then we won't call on them again. And then they can't come in with a new name and have their hand raised a second time. Does that feel comfortable for you, clerk?
Yeah, I think I get that now.
Okay.
Okay.
We had a king over there.
Yeah, I would just caution too, let's not game this out too far. There are people listening. Administrator Hill.
No, I was just going to make the point that that is exactly what we did at the last meeting. When we saw those names drop off and immediately populate again at the bottom, that's when we cut off public comment. Everybody that was on that list had commented, and then as soon as we were shutting them down, they repopulated, came in at the bottom. We did not go to those individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Well, I think we have a lot to work with here. And I deeply appreciate your commitment to free speech and the open public process. And once again, it's a pleasure, everyone. And if there's nothing else for the good, I am sorry, Attorney Pratt, please.
So you're not proposing any changes to your gov manual. It sounds like you're not saying stop the list at when public comment starts, but you're giving kind of using the flexibility. If the meeting has become disruptive and we see it's only new people shutting off, we will cut off public comment because it's only disruptive. Not a cut it off when public comment starts. That's what I heard. I'm just wondering if you want to make an amendment to your gov manual.
My preference is again, I'm going to shamelessly say this because I'm the one that's cutting them off, unfortunately, with Mr. McLean's kind assistance, that we do consider, you know, and just so happens that he is prepared. Those are for you. I have mine in my office. But I think, I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel, but I do believe that if we can figure out a way to stop it after public comment starts on the virtual side of things, you know.
This is on page 15.
In order that the 2 council members that are on Zoom don't have the binders.
Right. Yeah. Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Bodie and Councilmember Lebo Clerk McLean is going to be bringing this hopefully up on the screen if you can facilitate that. Councilmember Furtani.
So specifically to Attorney Pratt's point, we don't really have a cutoff mentioned in, yeah. So do we need to be explicit about that, or can that be sort of on an ad hoc basis, or is it better to actually have it written?
I think it's better for staff. If you expect that once public comment starts, no one can be added. If you really want that enforced, I think it's better for staff if you put it in the rule. If you want staff to cut it off when they just see people repopulating and it's only been disruptive comment and you give them that flexibility, then he can use that. But if you want something really strict, I would put it in the rule. It's just easier for staff.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that. Colleagues, what's your pleasure on this one? And Ms. Pratt, just a point of clarification, since this is under the purview of this agenda item, are we allowed to make a change our rules and I'm sorry, you change your rules. It's going to take me a while to stop saying that. Mr. Furtani.
So a point of order. So would this be a proposed amendment to the governance manual then?
If you wanted to. That's why I was asking. To me, it sounded like you might want to make an amendment if you wanted a definitive time. You might want to make an amendment to the gov manual. So that's why I asked.
I'm just wondering whether since we're going to be visiting GovMan again, whether we could do a head nod today and direction for staff and then bring this back. But I'm totally at your pleasure here. Councilmember Brittle.
So me rereading this, we read this manual so many times, and yeah, still new things in here that pop out. If a speaker makes disruptive, impertinent, slanderous, then may be asked to leave the council chambers, or if it's participating remotely, maybe requested that remove their position or permission to talk. So I think we have that part built in, which is if they're taking it beyond reasonable, then we can ask to have the microphone cut off, I guess. I think that's sufficient for right now, in the sense that that is how it worked last meeting. It got disruptive and it was shut down. So I guess if my colleagues feel like we might need more detail in that, I'm open to that, but I think it's kind of working as is because that is sort of the cadence that administration has found anyways.
Councilmember Furtani, make sure I got my mic.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so I think, but as Attorney Pratt said, having this written gives the staff the flexibility to do this. So I know that with the current city clerk and the current mayor, we know what's going to happen, but it's for the next ones that I worry about. So I think the amendment is a wise idea, but drafting it on the fly right now seems like a really bad way to set policy. So I'm thinking that perhaps we could form a committee of people who are interested, 2 or 3 people that would help draft new language. It's an amendment essentially to the 4.9.2 on the governance manual.
I think that's a great idea, and it occurred to me that we could amend the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting to include a couple of minutes or 10 minutes at the beginning to review we're talking probably one line potentially. And by the way, my apologies to Ms. Pratt, because one of the things I always said I would never do is to push off a recommendation by legal counsel, and I just did. So I
was just raising the issue,
Yeah,
so I
no,
wouldn't miss it if
I
that's something you
appreciate
wanted
that.
to
No
do.
time like the present. So either we could do what your suggestion is, or you could, we're here, you could move forward with a line now. I'm at your beck and call.
What would be
Councilor
an
Good.
example of the line that would be added, Kim? Maybe.
Something like that, a definitive time where you could no longer sign up virtually to give public comment.
Council. Mike, please. Thank you very much. Mr. Lebo, I apologize. I'm looking over my shoulder here.
I would just offer that I think we should take the opportunity to consider this a little more further than try and do it on the fly tonight. The first sentence says to address the council, actually, it's about being in person. It doesn't clearly recognize the virtual comment and how we address that. It doesn't talk about if somebody else wants to comment if they haven't signed up. I think we should avoid trying to redo this evening on the fly, and that we look at the considerations of, how is it done virtually? Can we recognize someone else in the public in person who hasn't signed up at the beginning? Because this says that if you wish to speak, you have to sign up at the beginning.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Riddle.
I'd be willing to assist on a small committee if that's the direction we're gonna go, and then bring some language to the cow.
You were looking like you're raising your hand, Mr. Goldman.
I'd also be happy to help.
Do we hear a third? Anyone else? John, Deputy Mayor Laurie? Mr. Furtani going once?
I'd certainly happy to help since I suggested it in the first place. What the heck?
Fair enough.
I thought you were just using your leadership delegation skills there.
Thank you, Tracy. Levity is important tonight, that's for sure. And would it be possible, it's up to you all, would it be possible for maybe to get a draft to Matt by Monday morning? So we could, at least people could have a chance to look at a sentence or two before the meeting?
Yeah.
Would that be, is that a reasonable timeline? Okay. I love it when a plan comes together. Councilor Riddle.
And just to reiterate, it's coming to the cow, but we don't make motions and we don't approve anything at the cow. So we'd be waiting to the next business meeting in order to do that, just to clarify.
We'll reach out to our virtual friends. Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Lebo and Deputy Mayor Bodie?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. I think with that, really appreciate the conversation and the consideration, everybody, and we're adjourned.